Tov lehodot ladonai, as you translated, even as you were singing Cantor Breitzer, it is good to give thanks to God. That is one example of that verb lehodot or modeh, hoda'ah, that we say so many times in Kabbalat Shabbat. Another example of how giving thanks is central to every Shabbat, not just this special Shabbat when we're obviously also thinking of giving thanks because of Thanksgiving. As Thanksgiving this year, as it does every year, gives way to a month of songs and advertisements and public merriment in honor of a holiday that many of us don't celebrate, this season might feel more different, or might make us feel more different from our friends and colleagues than we otherwise would. This is sort of the other side of Thanksgiving, which of course many of us love celebrating Thanksgiving, but then it leads to a month of hearing songs and being confronted with so many things that we don't actually celebrate during this season. As we now settle into this annual reminder of Jewish American distinctiveness, or perhaps otherness, during December, our Torah cycle gives us a parsha in which that distinctiveness comes to the fore. In Parshat Vayeishev, we begin the final saga, the denouement of the book of Genesis. By now, as we know, the world has been created, Abraham has encountered God, Jacob is renamed Israel, and the family story of patriarchs in which our people is rooted has finally taken shape. When we read of Joseph this week, we read of a biblical figure who is not a patriarch at all, but a son. Less integral to the Jewish story, perhaps, than the patriarchs, but a figure who epitomizes the Jewish difference that many of us, again, are keenly aware of at this season. There are a number of reasons why Joseph isn't traditionally counted as a patriarch. Of course, the most obvious reason is that the Israelites, as an entire people, are not descended from him the way they are from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he isn't literally the ancestor of our entire people. But you could treat him mythically as such, and we don't. Some commentators suggest this is because Joseph was too cocky, too full of himself. But no matter the reason, he's not lucky enough to have his name recited alongside his forebears in the Amidah and in other prayers each day and each week. Intriguingly, Joseph is also not considered to be one of our prophets, which may surprise some of you. Islam views him as a prophet, but Rashi's definitive list of Jewish prophets excludes Joseph. He has prophetic dreams, it's true, but he doesn't have the kind of relationship with God that many other biblical figures do. God never speaks to him directly, nor does God explain Joseph's dreams. But while Joseph is not a patriarch, nor is he a prophet, I think he has a unique status among the figures of Genesis, because I've come to think of Joseph as the first Jew, especially when it comes to distinctiveness. Now, I know Abraham is usually given that title since he was the first monotheist according to our tradition. And technically, the word Jew, or Yehudi, which once again means giving thanks, didn't emerge until sometime after the kingdom of Judah, which developed far later. But Joseph plays a number of roles that sound familiar to us as typically Jewish in the literary, sociological, and theological senses, even more than Jacob turned Israel, for whom our people is named. As a child, Joseph is set apart from the rest of his siblings. He's the chosen one, which we know is a mixed blessing for him. His distinction, positive though it is, leads to some of the hardest episodes in his life. And this sense of being special extends throughout Joseph's story. He's recognized for his difference while in Egypt, recognized as gifted, but also singled out as a Hebrew. Though God does not communicate with him directly when he's in Egypt, he has a special relationship with the divine. 4 times in a short section of text, we read that God was with Joseph. So too are the Jews, a people apart, a people that we also understand to have a distinct relationship with God. Not only is he set apart from others, Joseph also plays a role of being in between various others. As a teenager, he is in between his father and brothers, quite literally, so when Jacob sends him to fetch them in the field. He's the figure who stands between Potiphar, his Egyptian master, and Potiphar's household. He is, of course, also in between Potiphar and Potiphar's wife, though perhaps not as in between as she would have liked. And in the role of vizier, he stands between Pharaoh himself and the Egyptian people. This in-betweenness, which we might not immediately consider as Jewish, has tended to be the role in which Jews have found themselves throughout history. In between leaders and peoples, in between empires, between different places, religions, and ideas. This is perhaps why he, like his great-grandfather Abraham, is called a Hebrew, an Ivri, one who crosses over. He has come from someplace else, and he is mentally in between worlds. In chapter 39, Joseph is called a Hebrew twice, hinting to us that there's something important in this episode about Joseph's Hebrewness, which at least here is a symbol of Jewishness. During Joseph's time as a servant in the house of Potiphar, he succeeds in all that he does. We learn here too that Joseph is extremely good looking, and for this reason, Potiphar's wife becomes infatuated with him and makes sexual advances on him. The Midrash teaches that Potiphar's wife is so infatuated with Joseph that she invites the women of Egypt to her home just to watch him, and as they pretend to cook, peeling etrogs, according to the tradition, which is sort of charming, the women are so busy ogling Joseph's body that they accidentally cut themselves as they peel the etrogs. But the Torah teaches that Joseph famously refuses her advances multiple times. Defeated and likely embarrassed, she calls out to her servants, "Look, this Hebrew slave you brought us has come to make a sport of us." She repeats this a second time to her husband, referring to Joseph again as a Hebrew. The word Ivri, or Hebrew, is used to mark a national distinction. Potiphar's wife, her deliberate choice to call Joseph a Hebrew is intended, therefore, to emphasize his national difference. Many classical commentators pick up on this. Ramban and Chizkuni, for instance, both 13th century sages, comment that Egyptians were not allowed even to eat bread with Hebrews because the Egyptians saw them as different to the point of being inferior. Clearly, that didn't bother Potiphar's wife when she wanted something from Joseph, but when she didn't get it, she was able to wield her influence by pulling the Hebrew card, by pointing out his indelible difference. Here, too, we get an unfortunate reminder of the Jewish experience throughout history. In so many places and in so many eras, our difference is overlooked to the extent that we play along, but is used against us when we don't. In each of these ways, Joseph stands out as an archetype of the Jew. He doesn't receive the status that our tradition reserves for some of our most important figures, but he may be the most Jewish of any of them. The nice thing about seeing Joseph as the ultimate other and the ultimate Jew is that in the end, things turn out well for him. He reconciles with his family, he builds success and security in Egypt, where he relocates his brothers and eventually has a family. He's accepted by Egyptians to the point where he takes an Egyptian wife. He serves the society in which he lives and helps Egypt reach heights they couldn't have imagined without him. Though he was enslaved and though he was maligned by people unlike him, his story results in goodness and blessing that extends for a very long time after him. Joseph is a rare example of otherness turning into goodness. And if for many of us feeling different may be inevitable, especially from this weekend through the end of 2021, maybe we can follow his example and find some way of turning our difference at this season into a blessing. Shabbat Shalom.